Hello, everyone. As I told you a few times before, um, I was living in Netzer Chazani, which was the first settlement in the Gaza Strip, and there was a bris circumcision in Katif. So somewhere between these two yeshuvim, we walked on Shabbat for that bris, and that will be our topic today about what's called Eruv Tchumin, which means literally merging and combining the tchum of two different settlements together in order to allow us to walk from one to the other. So, um, if one wants to walk on Shabbat to a place that lies beyond his tchum, he can render it permissible by making an eruv tchumin before Shabbat, that is, by establishing their MEKOM SHVITA at a place where they put the eruv. By placing this eruv, they merge the old tchum, which would not have allowed him to go where he wants, with the new tchum, which will allow him to go there. This is why it is called Eruv Tchumin. Literally means merging and combining the Tchum. However, the distance that the Eruv Tchumin affords them in one direction is lost in the opposite direction. For example, if one places an Eruv Tchumin 2,000 amot, approximately 1,500 feet to the east of their home, they may now walk 4,000 amot eastward from his home to the Eruv, and 2,000 amot beyond the Eruv, but they may no longer walk westward at all. So that's why we're combining this MEKOM SHVITA, and we're going to learn now how to put this Eruv Tchumin and where to place it. There are two ways to shift one's MEKOM SHVITA. The first is by simply walking 2,000 amot in the desired direction before Shabbat begins and staying there for the onset of Shabbat, as long as one is there during the entire period of Ben Hashmashot, which we explained previously as between the stars, literally what we call twilight, between the setting of the sun and the appearance of the stars in the sky. That becomes their place, and their Tchum Shabbat is now calculated from that point. He does not need to verbalize anything for this to take effect. It is enough for him to intend to establish his Tchum from that point. In contrast, if one is hiking in a field during Ben Hashmashot but does not intend to establish their MEKOM SHVITA there, their MEKOM SHVITA remains their home and is calculated differently as we learned before. The second way, which is what we're going to explain about Netzer Chazani and Katif, is to set aside 2 meals worth of food at that place and recite the declaration for making an Eruv Tchumin, along with a bracha, as will be explained in the next section. Just like we said before about Eruv Chatzarot, combining two courtyards or two smaller neighborhoods together. We have to collect food from everybody and also make this declaration of the Eruv, which literally is like the Eruv Tavshilin on Erev Yantiv, when we want to cook for Shabbat, basically saying that we are combining the preparation of Shabbat and of Yantiv into one preparation, and therefore it's considered halachically approved. So an eruv tchumin should be made only for the purpose of a mitzvah, for example, in order to attend a Torah lecture or a mitzvah celebration, and so that's why I mentioned the bris. If one makes an eruv tchumin for some other purpose, it is still effective b'diavad. So if somebody just wants to go visit their friend, which is not a mitzvah on Shabbat, it is still effective b'diavad, which means not the letter of the law, but the allowance of leniency. When making an eruv tchumin, one must place it within 2,000 amot of their home. This way, his home will be within the tchum of the eruv, and he may then walk from his home to the eruv If his home is outside the Eruv Tchum, the Eruv is ineffective, and their Tchum is measured from their house. So that's why, as an enclosed Eruv of the Yishuv, of the settlement, we're allowed to put one basically 1,000 meters away or 1,000 yards away from the border of that yishuv. So one can actually use an eruv tchumin to travel 5,600 amot, not just 4,000, since the MEKOM SHVITA, where they set aside their eruv, is temporary, unlike a city, as above in section 6. They may have in mind for the new tchum created by the eruv to be oriented so that the square's diagonal faces their desired direction. He thus gains the additional corners. And let us learn about the actual placement of it and reciting the bracha. So the bracha will be very much like the Eruv Chatzorot, just instead of the last word Chatzorot will be Tchumin. One who wishes to make an Eruv by placing food must set aside 2 meals worth of food. If bread is used, it must amount to the volume of 6 eggs, which is approximately 300 cc. Others maintain that it must amount to the volume of 8 eggs. If one wishes to use food that is eaten together with bread, it is sufficient to use the amount of that food that would normally be spread on or eaten together with 6 eggs volume of bread. So if you want to leave their falafel sandwiches or any other kind of sandwiches, that is okay. If the eruv is meant to serve several people, 2 meals worth of food must be left for each person. If a large number of people are involved and one would like to minimize the bulkiness of the eruv, they may use olive oil, chocolate spread, or peanut butter as relatively small quantities of these foods are used with a large amount of bread. And one may also use a revi'it of vinegar, which is enough to use as a dip or dressing for the 2 meals worth of vegetables. Drinks may also be used for the eruv, as long as there are 2 revi'iyot, approximately 150 cc per person. Salt and water may not be used for the eruv. And so, just to conclude this idea, when we were walking, if I remember correctly, there was either a box of crackers or a box of biscuits. That was enough for everybody to have enough of a beitzah for each. And is like we said before, has to belong to everybody. If the food set aside for the eruv was eaten before Ben Mashot, the eruv is ineffective. So sometimes it's not people who eat it; it's sometimes animals that get to it. So if we walk to this place and we find that the food was gone, we must return. However, after Ben Mashot, the eruv may be eaten. Because once one has established their MEKOM SHVITA during Ben Mashot, it remains in effect for all of Shabbat. And last but not least, when setting aside the eruv, one should recite the following bracha: Blessed are you, Hashem, King of Sovereign of the universe, who sanctified us with His commandments and commanded us regarding the mitzvah of eruv, which is the same blessing for eruv chatzrot. One should follow this with the declaration: with this eruv, it shall be permitted for us to walk 2,000 amot from this place in every direction. But the avad, even if one simply said, this shall be an eruv, it is effective. But if he said nothing at all, he has not established an eruv, and that's why our words are so important. When the eruv is meant to serve several people, their names should be explicitly mentioned as part of the declaration. One must also take care that the eruv contains 2 meals worth of food for each person who needs to rely on it. So in the case of the bris that I said, we didn't know who is going to walk there and who isn't, and therefore we didn't say the specific names. We just said for all the people who are walking to Moshav Katif for this bris, and that was halachically sufficient, and so we'll stop here and open up for questions.